Sitting in the front row. That's fine. That's good. Just make sure you have paperwork. So you can pick up the paperwork out of the chairs, but make sure you have some paperwork there with you. You got your paperwork. Make sure you got your papers. All right. Hey, how you doing? Doing great. T-bone. Yes. All right, so first of all, thank you everybody for coming out. And thank you for making this a priority. I know, Friday evening sometime there are definitely other things that you could be doing, but I really appreciate you coming out and just giving a chance to possibly learn something a little bit new, or maybe actually to become maybe self-aware. So just to get you guys to know, he's like, well, who's this guy standing in front of me? Some of you guys already know me, right? And so you know the Tom side of me, and then some of you guys know the T-bone side of me, right? So I'll share with you later where the T-bone comes from. It's kind of one of those Saul to Paul stories of kind of like who I am now. If you guys don't mind, let's just bow in a word of prayer before we start. Our gracious Father, Jehovah, we come before your throne at this time. Father, we come before you as the church, as your children. Heavenly Father, just trying to be the best family that we can be. Help our hearts, help our minds, Heavenly Father, to dwell and focus on the things that we can learn, that we can be better servants for you, that we can be servants that strive for excellence. Help us, Heavenly Father, for our hearts to be changed if they need to be changed. Help us, Heavenly Father, for our attitudes to always be like Christ. Not that it's something to grasp, but help us to be humble in our things. And help us, Heavenly Father, to continue to love one another. In Christ's name we ask this. Amen. All right, so why leadership training or team building for a church? And this is really important, and I want you to think of this from this perspective. So it was about 7 years ago, I'm called and I'm asked by a congregation there in Alabama. So it's a small congregation, and when they give me a call, they're like, T-Bone, will you come down and will you help us? I'm like, okay, that's no problem. I can come down and help you, but what do you need? Okay, what do you need? So when they called and asked me, they said, these are the things that we really want. First, they said, we want our congregation to look like a spice rack. Okay, so what do you mean? So we want this congregation to look like the United Nations, right? So we want salt, pepper, cayenne, turmeric. And I said, okay, so how much are you actually going out into the community and doing things so that people are actually coming in and being exposed to it? And they said, not much. I'm like, okay, so that's one, we'll work on that. I said, what's the next thing that you want to do? They're like, well, we want to be like a really nice unified congregation. And not only that, we want to be unified to the point that when issues come up for us, that we know actually how to solve them. We know how to deal with them in-house, right? And so that's pretty much, conflict management. And then I said, well, how many members do you have? And so they said, well, we've got about 70 members. Okay. So I said, sure. Okay, so I'll come down and help with you. But I said, there's a few things that need to take place. There's a few requirements that I have. And I said, this is the first one. I said, I need for everyone in your congregation to know what their communication work style is. I'm like, what's that? I'm like, you'll see when I get there. But I say, here's the point. we need to make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? That everyone has access to the same knowledge. I said, if you want that congregation that's unified, I said, the next thing is everyone in your congregation needs to know what their conflict management style is. So I said, so when each person is dealing with each other, they know if they're dealing with a shark, a fox, a teddy bear, okay, a turtle, or an owl. Okay? Because the thing is, if I create self-awareness and I understand what I'm dealing with and what the other person's bringing to the table and what I'm bringing to the table, then it helps me to understand where I need to move in order to get the best results. Okay? I said, so that's the second thing. I said, the other thing is this. I said, I need to make sure that your leaders are there actually participating with you guys and learning the same information that you're learning. Okay, so they agreed to that. And then I said, here's the kicker though. I said, whoever comes into your congregation, new members, you need to run them through the same training that I'm giving you now. It doesn't have to be extensive, right? But when they come in, you run them through so they know their communication style, so they know that what their conflict management style is. And I said, what that's going to do is that's going to put everyone who comes into the group actually on the same page. And then I said, of course, we're going to have to go outside these 4 walls. So I went down, delivered the training, and then something kind of happened. So I get an email about 3 years later, and the email says help. Okay, the email says help. I'm like, oh great, what happened? So I open up the email, and in the email they said, hey T-Bone, we just want to share something with you. We need some help, this is what's going on. So when you came in, you did the training for us. We followed just like you said, we did what you said and said, so in 3 years, we now have 250 members. And we need to find another preacher to help us build because one isn't enough. And so I say, why is leadership and team building important for the church? Okay. That's just an example of the power that actually we can have when we are unified. And this is the way for me when I think of my Christianity, when I think of my faith. For me, I do not want to be mediocre. Because the God that I serve is an excellent God. And I want to give him all the excellence that I can give him. So when I go around and I do this at different congregations, the whole point is I'm trying to be better so I can be a better Christian, a better, son, better friend, better brother in Christ, because I don't want it to be mediocre, right? I don't want any of my worship to be mediocre. I want to always give the best that I can because the God that I serve always gives me the best over the top. And that's how I believe, that's how I show the love that I have for my God. And that's why I try and get other people to maybe think about it from that perspective. The other reason I believe that team building and leadership is important because the scriptures say that we're the salt of the earth, right? So we're the salt of the earth, we're the light of the world. And that's really important when we think about this. And when we think about it from this perspective, this is kind of my motto. Church people should be out in the forefront. So when it comes to leadership stuff, they should actually be looking to us. When it comes to talking about unification and stuff, they should be looking to us. In other words, we should be living our lives in such a way where people are first coming to us for the answers. I remember when I was in school and I was doing my one of my degrees, master's degrees in psychology and counseling. And my teachers would come up to me because I'd come up with what they considered to be these novel ideas, and they're like, T-Bone, they're like, can we steal this from you? I'm like, well, steal what from me? They're like, these concepts and stuff that you're coming up with, these are great. And I says, do you want to know where I really get them from? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, they're biblical principles that I figured out how to put application to them. That's all they are. They're biblical principles that I figured out how to put applications to. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about us being out on the forefront, where people are actually asking us. We should be the ones creating. You know, I saw you guys got the whole trafficking thing on the board. That's great. That's awesome. But then I think about how many of those are we actually leading? How many are we actually leading? So I work for CPS, right? So I get to see a lot of stuff. And I have to do a lot of training with people, conflict resolution, how to get along, right? How to talk to people, those different type of things, and it's really important. But then I think about and I look at the different organizations out there, and I'm like, but what if that was us leading? Leading the way when we're talking about trafficking. Leading the way when it talks about justice. What would that actually bring to the picture if Christians were there at the forefront, right? And that's something I can relate to, because then what I do is I take my talents and my skills, and then I do actual workshops for survivors of abuse on my own. Leading, because I believe that by leading I can give them something that possibly that they're not going to get somewhere else, right? That's what we're trying to build, and that's what we're hoping to build. All right, so first of all, let me share with you why do they call me T-Bone, okay? So originally I'm from Chicago area, Chi-Town, but then I lived in China for a while, and then I ended up in Seattle, Washington for about 22 years. So it was somewhere around 2007. I think I was working for Amazon during that time, right? Trying to make sure my carbon footprint is less. And so I'm catching the bus. So I'm on my way that early morning. I would think it was November to catch the bus. It was kind of dark outside. So I'm walking across the street. And as I'm walking across the street, the neighbor girl down the street who had just got her driver's license comes around the corner, her pickup truck at 35 miles an hour. And she doesn't see me as I'm walking out into the street. So she hits me. I go under the front tires, on top of the hood, through the air 35 feet, and then another car comes the other direction and hits me. So when I come to, I'm on a stretcher, I'm in a body brace, I'm in just in ultimate pain like I've never felt before, so they rush me to the hospital. So they get me to the hospital, they run me through the MRIs, and like, okay, let's see what's going on. Oh, his muscles have been separated from his bones, his spine has been realigned. Looks like he's been playing football for 20 years, brain concussion type of stuff. He has neurological damage. So I had quite a bit going on. But they're like, wow, they're like, with all this damage, he doesn't have a single broken bone in his body. Okay. So of course it takes me about 4 to 5 years to get to a point where I can recuperate somewhat, but it totally changes my life, right? So before the accident, I had very, very good memory recall, almost like photographic memory. When they pulled me up off of the concrete, I have what's known as short timers. Okay, so if you've ever seen the movie Memento, where the guy has a head injury and he can only remember 15-minute spots, so that became my world. Okay, so then I would eat something. Now I would have to leave the dish there so that I would remember that I had just eaten. Right, that type of stuff. So, you know, through the therapy and stuff, we finally got me up to 8 days. So I'm about good with new information for 8 days, right? So if I owe you money, get it within 8 days. Because then after that, I'm like, who are you? Okay. But we were sitting at dinner a couple years later, 5 years later, and someone, as I shared the story, was like, oh, wow. They're like, and they just kind of made a joke of it. They're like, you know, you weren't in the car, but you were T-boned, right? And I was like, you know what? I said, I'm going to embrace that with my memory stuff, because then that reminds me every time I hear that name that I have a purpose for being here. So that's my Saul to Paul, right? So that's my Tom to T-Bone, right? So that's why everyone calls me T-Bone. All right, so this is what I want you to think of from this perspective. We're going to do a lot of what we call lateral thinking here, just in these next few moments that we have together. What do you guys think that says up there? Good times are here again. Okay. So this is what happens. We're talking about kind of what's going on in your brain. Your brain is trying to actually conserve energy. And so what it does, it looks for patterns and it fills stuff in. Because it's like, look, I got to pump the blood. Okay, I got to make sure I'm defending you. I got to make sure you're hearing all these different type of things. So your brain is saying, I ain't got no time for that, right? So then what it does is, from a linear perspective, it fills it in even if it's incorrect. Okay? Now I want you to think about this from a leadership role. Anybody here ever have to deal with difficult people? Okay? Yeah. Now that's not your relative sitting right next to you, is it? Okay. So you have to deal with this sitting right next to me. So I want you to think about this. So what happens in the brain is, because of the pattern, your brain gets used to seeing that look. And so then your brain associates every time you see that look, you know that trouble's coming. That's what the pattern that it puts down. Now, let's just say you're dealing with someone you haven't dealt with before, but now you see that look, and so your brain goes, oh, no, not now. And the person's coming towards you, and you've already created this whole scenario of what's going to go down and how it's going to go down based upon linear. And so the person gets there, and you're like, okay, tell me what's wrong. What's the issue? Right there, what do you mean? Like, I've seen that look before. Every time I see that look, okay, and then they're like, oh, I got gas. You've created a whole world based upon linear thinking. Lateral thinking says this: I think I know what this is. I think I've seen it before, but let me just step back just a little bit just to make sure that's what it is before proceeding. That's going to be really important when we're talking about building, when we're talking about leadership. Stepping back a little bit and just making sure before I proceed. Now I'm going to put a statement up here. I'm going to ask you guys, what does this statement mean to you? Feel free to share, please. Okay, you only see things from your perspective. What else? Okay, you always try to relate the situation back to yourself. Yeah.
Like when I'm giving advice, my initial response is going to be what I would do.
Okay. 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 It's about you even when it's not about you. This phrase, I'm coming from this perspective. No matter who you interact with, the only thing that you can control is you yourself. That's it. That's it. So I give leadership classes, and they're like, T-Bone, help me to change this person. Hey, let's go over and let's fix this person. I said, there are things that we can do that we can help mentor, we can lead, we can coach, but I said it's about you even when it's not about you. Because the only thing that you can control is what you're bringing to the table. How are you going to respond? How are you going to react? And then oftentimes how I react actually influences what takes place. And so that's really key when we're talking about leadership, when we're talking about team building, and all it really is self-accountability. But here's the thing, how aware are you of what you're actually bringing to the table? What is your communication like?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
All right. So communication is important, right? Communication is really important. So here's the thing, communication in general, right? Communication, 7% are the words that you use, okay? So when we talk about communicating, 7% are the words. 38% is the intonation, okay? Get me a cup of coffee. What did I just communicate there? I want it now. What else? An order. Rudeness, lack of respect. Aggression. Okay, now watch this one. Give me a cup of coffee. What did I just communicate that time? Psycho, yes. You're like, what's wrong with this person? What changed? The volume was still the same. Yes. So the nonverbal are 55%, right? So when we're talking about communicating, so you even have to, when you think about it, it's like, oh, what was my face looking like when I actually said that to them? Okay, did I roll my eyes? Right? What was my body position or gesture? So when you're thinking about communication, when you're communicating with one another, when you're communicating with people out in the world, remember that 7%, 38%, and then that 55%, those non-verbal cues. Now, communication comes from the word communicare, and it just simply means this: to relate it in such a way that everyone understands, or as I say, have the same bubble over their head. Okay, so I'm going to say the word apple. How many people here are thinking about a computer or iPhone? Okay, but I said apple. Right, didn't I say apple, everybody? So why are you thinking about an iPhone or a computer? Yes, exactly, and I put that on the purpose. I do it subliminal. Because I made the assumption just because I said it, that you understood it. And that happens a lot. Now I'm going to say apple, red, you eat it, piece of fruit. Anybody still have an iPhone or a computer in their head? Okay. So here's the thing when we're talking about the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place, or just because I said it, that it has taken place. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a little activity here. Everyone should have a piece of paper, just a blank piece of paper. Okay, a blank piece of paper. Okay. Now this is going to take a little work because we're going to actually number off, because I'm going to put you in little small groups to do this so we can actually get it done faster. So we're going to go around the room and we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, till we get everyone in the room, and then I'm going to let you know what you're going to do next. All right, so we're just going to start with this row, work our way back, then over here up to the front. So go ahead. Yeah, there you go. Okay, good. Okay, ones, this is what I would like for you to do. I want you to just come and stand right over here on this side, please.
Do we need the paper still?
Nope, you won't need any paper. Two, 3, and 4, make sure you're sitting right next to each other. So you should be hopefully already. 2, 3, and 4, make sure you're sitting next to each other. So ones are right over here. 2, 3, and 4, make sure you're sitting next to each other. So 2, 3, and a 4, a 2, 3, and a 4, 2, 3, and a 4, 2, 3, and a 4. That's fine. All right. 2, 3, and 4. You should have a blank piece of paper in front of you and something to write with. Okay, blank piece of paper in front of you and something to write with. If you don't, everyone have something to write with. Okay, 2, 3, and 4, here are your instructions. First of all, you're going to only look at your paper only. You're not going to look at the person next to you, person behind you. You're just going to look at your paper. 2, 3, and 4, you're not going to say anything. You're just going to listen. Okay, 2, 3, and 4, you're just going to listen. So you're just going to be listening for words. You're not going to be using any nonverbal. You're not going to be flailing your hands. You're just going to be listening. Okay? Okay, so you guys think you got that down? Okay. Once, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a picture, and I'm going to assign you a 2, 3, and 4. You will only look at this picture. You will not look down at what they're drawing, anything like that. What you're going to do is you're going to tell them how to draw what you see on the paper. You can use whatever words that you want to, but it's words only. So don't use your hands like this. Yes, no Pictionary. You're just using your words, our 7%, to actually explain how to draw this. Now here's the other thing. You're not looking at what they're drawing. So you don't know how fast, how slow. All you're doing is you're looking at the picture, tunnel vision, and you're telling them what to draw. Okay? Here's the next thing. When I give you your picture, keep a nice poker face. Okay? Right? Because if not, you'll communicate, and you actually might give them something that they don't even need yet. Right? Because you might like, oh, and then they'll think, oh, this is hard. Then you've already transferred that thought to them. All right. So, that. And yeah, they can say whatever they need to help you to draw, but you won't be able to say anything to them. You're just going to draw what they tell you to draw. And this is going to be timed. And then we're going to see which team comes out with the closest of what the picture looks like. Oh, excuse me. Good boy, good boy. All right. So I'm going to send you to our last corner, 2, 3, and 4 over there. I'm going to send you to the next 2, 3, and 4 where you got Terry and those guys right over there. April, sorry. Okay. 2, 3, and 4. Let's send you where Lane is, right there. Where Lane is. Okay. 2, 3, and 4. Let's put you right there in the middle.
Okay. Who do I get?
We're going to put you on the next one, 2, 3, and 4, right there. Okay, and don't start till I tell you to start, please. Okay, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to put you there with Michael and those guys. 2, 3, and 4. We're going to put you with John. There. 2, 3, and 4. Let's put you right here. Yeah. 2, 3, and 4. We're going to put you right here. This group. 2, 3, and 4. Let's put you right here. I think they've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. I guess let's put you right there. 2, 3, and 4. Let's put you right there. Okay. Who doesn't have anyone? Raise your hand yet. Everyone has somebody? Yes?
Not us.
What? Yeah.
We know.
You want to? Yeah. Come on in. Okay. So then I'm going to make you guys a team. I'm going to turn you into a 2, a 3, and a 4. Okay. So actually, I'm going to take your picture back. And I'm going to let you guys draw.
Oh, we're going to draw.
You're going to draw.
Somebody's going to explain to us.
Give me one, a different one.
Yeah, I'll give you a different
They've
one.
all seen the one that
Right. Okay. So you guys are going to be 2, 3, and 4. This is going to be your leader who's going to explain to you. You're going to be with these guys on the draw. I'll let you know the go because it's timed. Okay. So remember, only the ones are talking. No one's looking at anyone. You're just looking at your paper only. Okay? And then we're going to see which team can draw whatever it is the best. Okay, ready? You don't know. Ready? Begin now. $60 seconds. $45 seconds. $30 seconds. $15 seconds. And time. All right, show them what you were trying to get them to draw. Okay, looks good. All right, so feedback. Ones, what did you notice? From your perspective, what did you notice? Hard to describe. What else? Specific? Okay. They're really troublesome. Okay, what else? Yes. Okay. But you were saying it, right? Yeah. Right. Okay, 2, 3s, and 4s. How was that for you? Yeah, amusing. You could not keep up. Right. Okay, what else? Okay. Exactly like the picture. Okay. All right. The reason I have you do this exercise, this communication exercise, because this is actually what happens with a lot of groups. And the reason I had you to not say anything, because often in our communication, what happens is we don't create what's called feedback loops. Feedback loops. So you notice 2, 3, and 4, you weren't able to ask any questions. You weren't able to say, hey, could you slow down a little bit? Oh, could you use another word because I don't understand that word that you're using? So when we're talking about communication, you always want to make sure that you create what's known as a feedback loop. In other words, let's just say you send out whatever, something in the email to the congregation. Do you make sure that there's a feedback loop so that people have a way to actually come back and ask you something? Now, you're like, okay, so feedback loop, how does this work? Okay, well, here's the point. Even God has feedback loops for us, okay? So 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 16 through 18, rejoice always, pray without ceasing. Guess what praying is? It's a feedback loop. It's a feedback loop. So God has built a feedback loop for communication for us. He's like, look, anytime, without ceasing, come to me. Let me know what's going on. Let me know what you're dealing with. Create a feedback loop. And so that's something when we're talking about leadership and we're talking about leading teams, we're talking about leading people in the congregation, those different type of things, we always want to create feedback loops. Now here's the thing. From a psychological perspective, when you create feedback loops, the people that you're leading, they feel valued, they feel heard, and oftentimes they feel validated. And these are really key when we're talking about leading people. See, if I have a beef or even if I have an issue with you, if I believe that you're actually listening to me and you're validating the things that I'm saying, right? I'll actually give you a little bit more grace, a little bit more compassion, a little bit of mercy, only because I believe you're authentic, that you're actually listening. Okay. So always create the feedback loops. And even if you're in areas, let's just say, of leadership, and you know the direction that you, whatever that you have to go, that you need to go, still value the input that is coming in. And thank the people for the input that they're giving you, okay? So that's the first thing I want you just to think about all time. Always create a feedback loop. With your kids, create a feedback loop. Even when you discipline them, create a feedback loop. Okay. Now, here's the next thing. So now I'm going to give you a little to see what is your communication work style. The reason I give you this assessment, because if you're going to move as a unit, if you guys are going to move together as a team, you really need to understand, first of all, what you bring to the table, because remember, it's about you even when it's not about you. But then you need to understand what each other person is also bringing to the table. And what happens is when you start to understand what you're bringing to the table, and then what other people are bringing to the table, it makes it easier for you to actually relate with them, because you start to understand a piece of who they are. So there's a little paper there in front of you, right here, and it says on it, driver, expressive, amiable, analytical. I'm going to give you some statements, and what you're going to do is, there's going to be a selection A, B, or C. Now, don't look at what it says for the A, B, or C. Just mark yourself with the one that you relate to most for the answers and circle that one, okay? And circle that one. Anyone doesn't have one of these? You need some pencils? Okay, sure.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Anybody else doesn't have? No. I will after you take it, because if not, what it does, it'll bias you, because you'll like, oh, I think that's what I am, and you'll go ahead and mark it, as opposed to like, okay, let me go ahead and mark and then find out what you are. Okay, did you need writing?
Yeah. You got a pen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let's see what our communication works out. Number one, when talking to a friend or fellow member, A, I maintain eye contact the whole time. B, I alternate between looking at the person and looking down. C, I look around the room a good deal of the time. Or D, I try to maintain eye contact, but look away from time to time. So A, B, or C, and just circle the whole answer, because it'll be easier for you to do later. So notice the numbers. 1, okay, 2, 3, 4, so it goes column-wise. Yeah. One of those would apply to you, A, B, C, or D. So which one do you gravitate towards the most? Yeah. Just circle. So if A is you, then circle A for number 1. Circle that whole thing. See, that's why I said communication is tricky. Yes, go ahead. Sure.
Oh, that's
Well, you can if you want to. Sure. All right, number 2. So find number 2, and then you're going to either circle A, B, C, or D, depending on which one that you gravitate towards. If I have an important decision to make, A, I think it through completely before deciding. B, I go with my gut instincts. C, I consider the impact it will have on other people before deciding. Or D, I run it by someone whose opinion I respect before deciding. Okay, number 3. My work area mostly has, or I would like it to have, A, family photos and sentimental items displayed. B, inspirational posters, awards, and art displayed. C, graphs and charts displayed. Or D, calendars and project outlines displayed. Which one do you gravitate towards the most? Okay, but so for A and B, which one would make most impact for you? Yep. Yeah. That's where the real leadership takes place. Number 4, if I'm having a conflict with someone, A, I try to help the situation along by focusing on the positive. B, I stay calm and try to understand the cause of the conflict. C, I try to avoid discussing the issue causing the conflict. Or D, I confront it right away so I can get it resolved as soon as possible. Okay, 5. When I talk on the phone with another member, A, I keep the conversation focused on the purpose of the call. B, I spend a few moments chatting before getting down to business. C, I'm in no hurry to get off the phone and don't mind chatting about personal things, the weather, and so on. Or D, I try to keep the conversation as brief as possible. Huh? Oh, it's quite a bit though, you'll see. Okay, 6. If a member or friend is upset, A, I ask if I can do anything to help. B, I leave him alone because I don't want to intrude on his privacy. C, I try to cheer him up and help him to see the bright side. Or D, I feel uncomfortable and hope he gets over it soon. Okay, 7. When I attend church meetings, A, I sit back and think about what is being said before offering my opinion. B, I put all my cards on the table so my opinion is well known. C, I express my opinion enthusiastically, but listen to other ideas as well. Or D, I try to support the ideas of the other people in the meeting. Okay, 8. When I give a presentation in front of a group, A, I am entertaining and often humorous. B, I am clear and concise. C, I speak relatively quietly. Or D, I am direct, specific, and sometimes loud. Okay, 9. When someone is explaining a problem to me, A, I try to understand and empathize with how she's feeling. B, I look for specific facts pertaining to the situation. C, I listen carefully for the main issue so that I can find a solution. Or D, I use my body language and tone of voice to show her that I understand. Her or him. Okay, number 10. When I attend training programs or presentations, A, I get bored if the person moves too slowly. B, I try to be supportive of the speaker, knowing how hard the job is. C, I want it to be entertaining as well as informative. Or D, I look for the logic behind what the speaker is saying. Okay, 11. When I want to get my point across to members, friends, or family, A, I listen to their point of view first and then express my ideas gently. B, I strongly state my opinion so that they know where I stand. C, I try to persuade them without being too forceful. Or D, I explain the thinking and logic behind what I am saying. Okay. 12. When I am late for a meeting or an appointment, A, I don't panic, but call ahead and say I will be a few minutes late. B, I feel bad about keeping the other person waiting. C, I get very upset and rush to get there as soon as possible. Or D, I apologize profusely once I arrive. Okay. 13, I set goals and objectives that A, I think I can realistically attain. B, I feel are challenging and will be exciting to achieve. C, I need to achieve as part of a bigger objective. Or D, will make me feel good when I achieve them. Okay, 14. When explaining a problem to a member, friend, whom I need help from, A, I explain the problem in as much detail as possible. B, I sometimes exaggerate to make my point. C, I try to explain how the problem makes me feel. Or D, I explain how I would like the problem to be solved. Okay, 15. If a member is late for a meeting, activity scheduled at my house or at the building, A, I keep myself busy working until they arrive. B, I assume they were delayed a bit and don't get upset. C, I call to make sure I have the correct time, information, date, time, and so on. Or D, I get upset that the person is wasting my time. Okay. 16. When I am behind on a project and feel pressure to get it done, A, I make a list of everything I need to do, in what order, by when. B, I block out everything else and focus 100% on the work I need to do. C, I become anxious and have a hard time focusing on my work. Or D, I set a date to get the project done by and go for it. Okay, 17. When I feel verbally attacked by a member, A, I tell him or her to stop it. B, I feel hurt but usually don't say anything about it to her or him. C, I ignore his or her anger and try to focus on the facts of the situation. Or D, I let her or him know in strong terms that I don't like his or her behavior. Okay, 18, final one. When I see a member whom I like and haven't seen for a while, A, I give him or her a friendly hug. B, I greet her or him, but don't shake his hand. C, I give him or her a firm but quick handshake. Or D, I give him or her an enthusiastic handshake that lasts a few moments. All right, so now with your circles, count up how many you have. How many are drivers, how many amiables you have, how many analyticals, and how many expressives. All right, so hopefully you have 4 scores or 3, just depending on. All right, so let's learn a little bit about each of these first. All right, so if your high score is analytical, please stand up. Okay. All right, so everyone take a look. These are our analyticals. Okay, these are our analyticals. Okay. All right. Analyticals, you can sit. All right, so what do we usually know about analyticals, okay, from a general perspective? They're usually polite, reserved, they're logical, they're fact and task oriented, okay? They focus on precision and perfection, okay? Now, here's the other thing. Their strengths, they're persistent, they're diligent, they're often cautious, and they approach things from a systematic approach. Okay? Now, things that might be viewed as weaknesses for them. People will sometimes think of them as being withdrawn, boring, quiet, reclusive, and sometimes sullen. Then people also sometimes will label them as being indecisive. And it's not that they're indecisive, but they have what we call as analysis paralysis. Because they're the type of people like they need to have all the information before they can make the decision. Okay, I need to make sure I have all the data points in order to make the best decision. So it's really not that they're stubborn, it's just that from a communication work style, okay, their brain is thinking that in order to make the best decision, I've got to have all the data points, okay? Now, for analyticals though, sometimes perfectionism can be seen kind of as an fault for them, and people don't see them as being risk takers. Well, it's not that they're not risk takers, they just need to make sure they have all the data before they take the risk, okay? So if you're working with someone and you realize that they're an analytical, and it comes to that perspective, then what is what you want to do? How do you want to communicate with them? So when communicating with an analytical, be systematic, be thorough, be deliberate, okay? Focus on whatever the task is. And here's the thing. Be ready to answer how questions. Because analytical people are thinking about process. Hey, how did you reach those numbers? Okay? How did you come up with that conclusion? Because their mind is working from a processing perspective, okay? So that's how the analytical, if that's the communication work style that they might be using. All right, if you scored high on your amiable, please stand up. All right, look around, these are our amiables. And proud of it, yes. Wear it. Right. Okay, all right. Amiables, you can sit down. All right, so amiables, what we kind of know about them in general terms are they're polite but reserved. They're also, oops, sorry, not that one. I was like, that doesn't sound like an amiable. Okay, so they're devoted and consistent, dependable and loyal. So amiable are the people that when everyone else has given up, they'll still be there going forward. They persevere. They're great team players. They're good listeners, and they're quite sensitive. Okay, so empathetic. They love working in groups. They like working with individuals. But here's the thing about amiables. They don't like conflict. Okay, so they will avoid conflict if they need to. Okay? Here's the thing about amiables. They enjoy stable environments, and amiables often create stable environments for the rest of the team. Okay, so since they enjoy stable environments, they're the ones that are usually actually creating the stable environments or have that effect on other people. Now, from a weakness perspective, how it might be viewed, okay, it doesn't mean it's true, but it might be viewed from this way. So you might be viewed, one, as indecisive, and the reason that you're seen as being indecisive, because you're amiable and you want to make sure that everyone is okay. So it's coming down to that relationship perspective. Amiable sometimes are accused of focusing too much on others, to conforming, to being too nice, to being too painstakingly compliant, right? And then slow to make decisions, okay? Well, the reason they're slow to make decisions is because they want to make sure that everyone is okay before the decision is made. See, that's why they're the amiables, okay? Okay, so just notice the things when they're being labeled. Okay, now, so if I'm dealing with an amiable, how do I want to communicate with an amiable? One, be relaxed and agreeable, okay? Here's the thing about amiables, because they like stable environments. If you have a change that is getting ready to take place and your congregation is filled with amiables, you always start with the status quo first. What's staying the same before you introduce the change. Okay? You always start with what stays the same, the status quo, and then here are the changes we're making. Because in the amiable brain, once the brain hears, oh, okay, that's staying the same, I can relate to that, then it's easier for the brain to then accept the changes that are coming after that, because they're trying to keep that stable environment. Okay? Be logical, systematic, create plans, written guidelines. Now here's the thing about amiables. You've got to be able to answer the why questions. So why are we doing it that way? Okay? Or why isn't so-and-so helping me? Okay, so we've got those relationship questions. And here's the thing about amiables. Because they're relationship driven off the time, use words like we. Because they want to feel like it's a we, it's a unit together, okay? And then, of course, don't push and don't rush, okay? All right. How many have driver as their high score? Please stand. One? Okay. All right, drivers. Drivers are seen as high achievers. They're risk takers, they're mover and shakers, and they're usually not averse to risk, right? People think of them as being strong-willed, practical, organized. Sometimes people think that they're forceful, but they're definitely decisive, okay? So here's the thing. If you're dealing with someone who's a driver, look for the person who's going to tell you the way that they see it. Not trying to be mean, not trying to be harsh, but in the driver mode, that's how their brain is working, okay? And so they're going to tell you exactly the way that they see it. Now, for the driver, because they're driving the bus and they're thinking so much about the goal, you got to be careful, right? Because if not, they will run you over, right? Because they're thinking about getting to the goal. Okay, it's not that they don't like you, but their brain is seeing the goal, and that's what they're thinking about. So sometimes they're in that world. Now, sometimes you have to help bring them back, like, okay, but just realize that. Okay, so the individual is not concerned with how something's getting done, but what is being done. So what are you doing about it? What is so-and-so doing about it? Okay, so that's going to be their word, what? What should you do? What should we do? Now, drivers, this is what you need to realize, okay? So when you're using this communication style, people might view you as being stubborn. They might view you as being domineering. They might view you as being impatient, insensitive, and short-tempered, and little formalities. Because in the driver's mind, you're like, niceties? Ain't nobody got time for that, right? Because we got to get to the goal. Right? But if you realize that when you're dealing with that type of person, it's going to be easier for you to deal with that person. All right, so when you're working with the driver, how do you want to communicate? One, focus on the task. Talk about what you think the expected results are going to be, okay? Be very factual as much as possible, okay? Be organized with your information and discuss what questions. Now, here's the thing when you're working with a driver, okay? Don't argue feelings. Because now you're speaking in a language that they're not understanding, okay? I remember when I was working at Microsoft and I was working for a team, and I had a team, I was coaching a team of like 200 individuals, and you figure at Microsoft, right, they have enough money to buy new computers for the employees, right? So here I am with my team, and my team is suffering because now they don't have that much RAM in their computer, we're wasting time, their computers are rebooting all the time, and I'm frustrated, right? And I go into my GM, and I'm sharing my feelings of my team, no, we're not getting our work done, and it's hurting, and it's just going in one ear and out the other. And so I do this for about 2 months, and I can't figure out why I'm not getting results. And then I figured out, I'm like, oh, I'm using a communication style that he doesn't relate to. He was an analytical driver. Those were his top 2 scores. He's an analytical driver. So then I'm like, okay, I've got to approach this from a different perspective, because I'm the next one we're getting ready to show. So I sat down, I did research, I figured out how much my team was actually losing in hours, productivity, how much that was costing the company. And then I put down the type of computers that we could get, what they would do, how much they would cost, and then I gave them a couple of options, put it in email, bullet point, send it to him. 10 minutes later, he comes down my door, approved. I'm like, approved? I'm like, it took me 2 months. 2 months. But I had to learn what his communication style was, and then once I put it in that communication work style, bam, because he was then able to relate to it, right? So even think about that when you're working with someone, you're like, man, you know, like, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Well, maybe they don't, because that's not their communication style, work style, and now I have to figure out how to move in that direction. All right, our last one. All right, if expressive was your high, please stand. Okay, let's look at our expressives here. Okay. All right, now expressives, they're going to say some harsh things about us, but that's okay. Okay, they're going to say some nice things, but they're going to say. Okay, expressives, here we go. Verbally adept, personality, we're engaging, we're accommodating, we're supportive of others. We are actually more relationship rather than task oriented. Okay? We're always ready for something new. Okay? We want to be part of the gang. We're enthusiastic, we have diplomatic skills, and we have the ability to inspire others. Isn't that great? However, we might be viewed, our weaknesses, they say that we're often impatient, we have a tendency to generalize, verbal assaults, okay? Sometimes irrational behavior, and that's because expressives, we're viewed as being undisciplined, reactive, unorganized, because we're sharing our feelings. We're expressing, right? And so we're all like this, and people are just looking at us like, you know, are you waving planes down or what? But that's the way that we often express, okay? So then when communicating with us, first focus on developing a relationship. Because if you're dealing with someone who's an expressive, the work will not get done if the relationship between you and me isn't good. So it's like, it's a personal thing. It's a person like I can't work, I can't get the job because I feel like there's something in between us, right? The relationship isn't good, right? Be enthusiastic, be open, relate, and when you share information, share it in the form of stories and experience. When you talk to an expressive and you're giving an expressive directions, you don't say go 5 miles southeast, turn right, then go 4 miles northwest latitude, because that doesn't in our brain. It's like when you get to the end of the street, there'll be a Safeway on this side, there'll be from this side. When you get to the next corner, there will be a, Le Schwab, and you turn there, right? Because their brain is looking for stories, it's looking for a narrative. And then when you're communicating with them, you're going to answer who questions. Who's going to be working on the project with me? Who else is going to be involved? Who's going to be there? Because the expressive, the relationship is the first thing that's coming into their mind. Okay? All right. So that's the first two parts. We're going to jump into the next one after you guys take a break. Because the next one, we're going to get into Paul and Barnabas, and we're going to figure out now what is our conflict management style. So if I'm a shark, a turtle, a teddy bear, a fox, or an owl. All right. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey.
When I came in here, I was like, I think I know you from
Okay.
somewhere. I'm sorry. I think I'm on.
Is
your
it on?
speak-
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm still on.
But I don't want to say it all.
Okay. Is Jeb back here?
What do you need?
So, do you guys know the song In Need?
I don't think so.
Okay, doesn't. I just want to see if he can put the PowerPoint. It says In Need on there.
You're on
Yeah. Because then I want it to be like the last thing I want to show you guys before we end. In Need. Yeah. You'll see it. You'll see the. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let me share a little bit when we're talking about the assessments and how this usually works. So what we know from a neuroscience and the psychological perspective is usually you will gravitate towards 2. So usually whatever your top 2 numbers are, okay, then that's what you gravitate towards using the most or first. Now, if you look at your numbers and you're like, man, they're almost all a tie, that means you have adaptability. So that means when you need to be analytical and you're dealing with someone analytical, you can be analytical. When you're dealing with someone who's an expressive, you can be an expressive and understand how that expressive is communicating, right? So if you're looking at your numbers and like, oh, they're like, oh, whatever, close to the same, that just means you have the ability to adapt with those. Now, here's the caveat. If you have a real high number and a real low number, that means that when you run into somebody with that low number, you might have a little headbutting going on. Okay? Yeah. You could argue with yourself quite a bit. Yes. Okay. So just realize that. So then if you run into somebody like, man, why am I butting heads? And then you're like, oh, because maybe I'm expressive and they're analytical. And so this is where and so now either I have to figure out how to switch and start relating more from an analytical perspective, or they need to figure out if they can come more to an expressive, right? And the reason this works so well, because when I did this with the congregation in Alabama, what they would do is they would kind of say to each other, especially if they were in meetings, they would start the meetings out, I'm an analytical, I'm an expressive, I'm a whatever, right? So then everybody knew what they were dealing with inside the room, right? So then it didn't become this whatever all personal stuff because, oh, analytical, now I get it. So let me see if I can put it whatever in these type of terms, right? So it actually helped for creating the unity, because then they understood each other just a little bit more. Okay, all right. So our last one, now we're going to talk about this one, and we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to give you a little bit something here before I talk about that one. Does everyone have their emotions sheet? The message of emotions? So it has faces on it. All right, how many people have heard of emotional intelligence? Daniel Goldberg, well, okay, he got famous for marketing it, right? Pretty much emotional intelligence has been around for a long time. Aristotle actually talked about emotional intelligence. Jesus talks about emotional intelligence. So they just get credit and they get to make money off of it because they figured out how to market it, pretty much. But here's the reality when we're talking about it. And sometimes it's a hard concept for us coming from a Western society, because for some reason we seem to have this battle between logic and emotion. And oftentimes in our society, one is put over the other, right? Oh, so if you've got logic, right, I'm more ready to listen to you as opposed to the emotion. But here's the reality. Psalm 139, where you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You can't separate one without the other. And that's how God made it, right? So you can say things to me, you can say, oh, well, he's just, he's so logical and calm. And the reason you listen to me, it's not really the logic, but you assume that because I'm saying it in a calm voice directive, right, that you give it more authority. But notice there, the calm is what? It's an emotion, right? So you can't separate the two because that's how we're created. Even God is created. Not created, but even God shows those different things, right? So just think about when he's getting ready to wipe the Israelites out of the way. Moses, get back. I'm getting ready to wipe them out. Okay, that's emotion, right? He was angry. Okay, was he being illogical? Was he being irrational? He wasn't, right? Right? And yet the emotion was there. He had the right to be angry because they were disobeying and trampling on his laws. And he's like, Moses, I've had enough of this. So the emotion was there, and then Moses steps in, but what will they say? Right? And then God relents, and then he hits the other side of the mercy. Right? He still allows a piece of justice to take place because he's God, right? But both of them are right there at the same time, okay? So just remember that when we're thinking about from emotion, don't put one above the other. Use them both because that's what we're created. All right, so I'm just going to give you a little thing here. These are the message of emotions. So when you're dealing with someone, try not to just make the assumption like, oh, well, don't worry about him. He's just being emotional. Okay? Try and see if you can understand the message behind the emotion. All right, so here's the first one. When we're uncomfortable, the message of the emotion, when you feel uncomfortable, that means that you need to change the state of something. So think about it. When you're sitting in your chair and it feels uncomfortable, what do? Yeah, you move or you shift or what? Because you need to change the state of something. Okay, so when I'm uncomfortable, what it's telling me is that I need to change the state of wherever it is. Now, it could be my state of mind is the thing that needs to be changed. Okay? So if I'm feeling uncomfortable, maybe I need to ask, okay, so why am I feeling uncomfortable? Am I supposed to feel uncomfortable about this, or am I creating this? Something needs to change. Okay? When I have fear, okay, what fear is telling me, or what fear usually says to us, the emotion, the message is that I need to prepare myself to deal with something. And it's usually to avoid what we consider the negative consequences or whatever, right? Because usually when you fear something, because you feel like, oh, I'm not prepared for that. Okay? So when I'm afraid and the fear comes, the message that it's giving me is that, oh, maybe there's something that I need to prepare. So I feel afraid to give my speech. Well, why is that? Well, maybe because I haven't prepared to the point where I feel like I really have it down. And then the negative consequence of, oh, I feel like people are going to laugh at me. Okay? So when someone else, when they're expressing fear, think about that. Okay? The emotion of hurt. Okay? When hurt comes along, the message that hurt is giving me that I have some type of expectation that has not been met. When I'm hurt, there's been some type of expectation that has not been met. Okay? And so then that's why I have a feeling of loss, because that expectation hasn't been met. Okay? It's okay. She's like, it's time for bed. We're almost done, honey. Anger. Okay? What is anger telling me? What is the message? Okay? So usually when I'm angry, the thing is that I feel or I believe that some important rule or value has been violated. So that's like God when he's angry with the children of Israel. He's angry because some important rule or value has been violated. And that's what that message is communicating, that emotion. Okay? Frustration. So if I'm frustrated, What is that telling me? What is that emotion communicating? Okay? It's communicating that I need to change the approach of something, right? Because when you're frustrated, you're like, oh, I just can't figure. Then that means you need to change the approach. Okay? So you're like, oh, why can't I just lose that weight? I'm so frustrated. You need to change the approach to the way that you're trying to achieve that goal. Okay? Disappoint. Okay? So when we're disappointed, what is that emotion, an indicator, or trying to tell us? Okay? It's trying to tell us that we need to realize that whatever that expectation or outcome, it's probably not going to happen. That's what disappointment is. Whatever that expectation or outcome that I have, that it's probably not going to happen. Right? And so you want your kid to be a doctor just like you want to be a doctor, but man, they're really into playing that piano and they want to be a pianist, and you feel disappointed because your expectation and outcome of that person being a doctor like you probably isn't going to happen. Okay, so that's what that's communicating. Okay? Guilt. Okay? Guilt. Guilt has its place, but then also there's what I call false guilt. When I'm feeling guilty, the message that's being communicated, of course, is that I have violated some type of standard. It could be my standard, it could be your standard. Usually it's your own standard, whatever values that you're living by, but it's communicating that I have violated that standard. Okay? So that's why I feel guilty, because I've violated that standard. Okay? If I'm feeling inadequate, or you're dealing with someone and they feel inadequate, what is that emotion telling? What is it saying? Okay? When you feel inadequate, the emotion is an indicator that I need to do something in order to get better. So that's the reason I feel inadequate. Right? So then the message is giving me, okay, so I need to do something in order to get better. I need to do something to help me improve. Okay? Overwhelmed. Anybody here ever get overwhelmed? Okay. Till you retire. This one is a hard one. So think about this. Think about times when you are overwhelmed and you just don't know what to do. This is what that emotion is communicating to you. You need to reevaluate your priorities. That's all. You just need to reevaluate your priorities. So you just got to decide what's important, and then once you decide that, then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're not overwhelmed anymore because you've figured out what the priority is, right? So that's often when we talk about overwhelmed, that's what it's for, is because, oh, I can't figure out what needs to go first. Once you do that, I promise you, you won't be as overwhelmed as you were before. And then the final one, lonely, okay? So you're dealing with people and they have this lonely emotion that's coming up for them all the time, okay? It just simply is an indicator that they need connection. That's right, they need connection, okay? And it doesn't always have to be social connection, but they need connection. And so if you just understand these indicators of emotion, when you see them in other people, when you see them in yourself, it will help you and give you a little bit understanding of how you can actually either help the person or the individual, right? Or even for yourself. So oftentimes when I'm getting overwhelmed, the first thing I'll think, okay, what do I need to reprioritize? What do I need to evaluate and figure out, okay, what needs to come first? Bam, bam, and then once I do that, I'm not overwhelmed because now I have direction for where I'm headed. All right. All right, so our last piece that we're going to throw in tonight, we're going to take a look at Paul and Barnabas. So we're going to do a little conflict management or conflict resolution here. All right, so here we are, of course, Acts, I think it is Acts 15. It says, and after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brethren in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. And now Barnabas wanted to take with them John Mark, okay, who's also related to Barnabas. But Paul thought best not to take with them the one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. So Barnabas took Mark with him, sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. All right, so we got certain things that are going on there, and I love this, the Greek there for that sharp disagreement. The word actually is just disagreement, but when you look at it in the Greek, then it has a certain connotation to it. So it means to stir to anger, right? Or to be really super irritated or incensed, okay? So that's what was going on with Paul and Barnabas. So this is the question I want to ask you, because now we're going to just take a quick look at the psychology of conflict. Now, if you can get this down, trust me, if you can get these little steps down, it will help you, okay, to keep unity. It will help you when you're dealing with other people and when there's a conflict. My first question is, who in here likes conflict? No one? I usually have one, at least one, in the group that likes conflict. Okay. What is bad about conflict?
There's a risk of damaging a relationship.
Okay, risk of damaging the relationship.
I didn't hear what you said.
Hmm?
I didn't hear what you said.
So what is, he said there's a risk of damaging the relationship. So my question was, what is bad about conflict? Okay. Okay, in marriage it leads to divorce. It stalls out progress. Oh. She says 40 years. She says only if it's not resolved. Okay. So we often, just at the word conflict, we often give it a negative connotation. And usually it's not the conflict that we're thinking about. What we're thinking about is our past experience with someone where there was a conflict. So whether there was yelling or screaming or the attitude, that's what we're focusing on. Okay. Whereas conflict, and I'm going to share something with you here, maybe to think about it from a different perspective. Now, if I give you this definition of conflict right here, okay, so once I share with you what I share with you, you will not have to spend $60,000 and go get a master's degree in psychology and counseling. You'll know just about as much as we do, okay? So, differences of perceptions, understandings, goals, or values in areas where you care about the results. In that definition right there of conflict, where do you see the most possibility for a ray of hope?
Determine the goal,
Okay,
change the goal.
Okay. Perceptions? Okay. Now notice, go ahead. Yes, that's the key. In areas that you care about the results. Now I want you to think about this from this perspective, okay? What if the person that you're having the conflict with, what is the first thing that came to your mind? What if it was this? I wonder what it is that they care about the results just as much as I do. Think about that. Conflict. And the first thing you're thinking is, when the conflict comes, I wonder what it is that they care about the results just as much as I do. What does that do to your thinking? Okay. Yes, it actually puts your mind actually in a different cycle because now you start becoming detective. Because you're trying to figure out what it is that they care about the results just as much that however it's being presented, right? So when they're coming at you and you're like, I wonder why they're yelling. What is it that they care about the results just as much as I do that it's causing them to yell about this? Because they're passionate about it too. But what is it? What is it that they care about the results? So now what you're doing is you're assigning the positive because you're like, okay, I care about something and there's something that they care about. So can we figure out what it is that we both care about and then move forward from there? So when I used to live in China, so what happened was I used to study martial arts and I studied whatever with the Shaolin monks there. And so when I got there, they're like, okay, we're going to give you a different perspective, a way of thinking about conflict because you're coming kind of with a Western perspective. And the Western perspective is that conflict is bad, it's negative, it has all these different type of things, but we're going to give you a different way of thinking about conflict that will help you. And this is what they said. Conflict is not good or bad. Conflict is simply an indicator of where the boundaries are. Conflict is not good or bad. It's simply an indicator of where the boundaries are. Now, once you determine where the boundaries are, then that's where the real work takes place. Conflict is just showing you where they are. So when someone disagrees with you, it's just showing you where the boundaries, where the barriers are. Now you've got to figure out, what do I do? Is the boundary and barrier there because it's a toxic relationship? Is the boundary and barrier there because the person is afraid? So he says if you go into conflict thinking of it not as good or bad, but just saying, oh, that's where the boundary is. That's where the barrier is. Now let's see what we can figure out. He says you'll have a whole much better time of dealing with conflict. And so by assuming that, that made it easier for me to now go into places where I have to mediate conflict. Because when I'm coming in, what I'm thinking is, okay, where's the boundary for this group? Where's the boundary for this group? What's the disagreement for this group? What's the disagreement for this group? Now that we know where that is, how do we move forward from those and see if we could collaborate or whatever it is that we need to do? Right? So then I don't go in being freaked out and being negative about conflict because, oh, it's just showing me an indicator of where the boundaries and where the barriers are. All right, so now I'm going to share with you the 3 basic seeds of conflict, okay? 3 basic seeds, and if you can remember this and whatever it is that you're dealing with, family, friends, at work, those different type of things, it will definitely help you. Okay, here's the first basic seed. So, you or I, whoever, feels like we're being cheated or robbed of something that we need or want. Okay? So it's about the what. Being cheated or robbed of something that we need or want. Okay? So that's the first part. The second seed, now this is where the blame game takes place. Okay? So now it becomes, who is the one who is responsible for restricting me and denying me of this thing that I want or need? So first the what, then now the who. Okay? And then the last one is this. It's called violation. Whatever this restriction is, that it violates for me some type of rule, some type of standard, some type of value, some type of code, some type of ethic, whatever it is, it's a violation for me. Okay? Those are your 3 basic seeds when we're talking about dealing with conflict. So when I come into conflict with someone, the questions that I'm asking myself, I wonder what it is that they feel like they're being cheated and robbed of. 2, who is the one that they're holding responsible or thinking that's restricting them from whatever, and then what does that violate for them? And then that helps me to better understand what the conflict is. All right, everybody think they got those 3 basic seeds? Okay, now, if you saw them, could you pull them out? Those 3 basic seeds. Okay, I'm gonna give you a little test here. Here we go. See if you can identify these 3 basic seeds. This is Justin and Rachel. Okay, Justin and Rachel.
Now what am I supposed to do? I was counting on you to finish this up.
You should have finished it yourself. You're single. I have 2 little ones to take care of at home. You know how crazy my schedule is.
I'm tired of always having to do your work.
Hey, calm down. What's the problem here?
Well, you were standing there, you heard. Rachel didn't finish her half of the project, and now we're going to miss our deadline.
Amy, you know I have kids, and it's difficult for me to work in the evening.
Rachel, how close are you to finishing the work?
I'm sure it can be finished by Friday.
Great, Friday is 2 days too late. That means we miss our bonus, and I was really counting on that money. This is your fault. You assigned her to this. I can't believe you got promoted to project manager over me.
Wow. Rachel, I trusted you.
None of you understand how hard it is being a working mom.
Judy, do you have a minute? I have a...
Okay, so see if we can figure out these 3 points. Justin feels robbed or cheated of what? Bonus? Promotion? Okay, yep. Anything else? Yeah, yeah, it definitely feels like it's unfair. Okay, so time. Okay. Who does he blame? Rachel? Yes, boss. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, I put Rachel's kids, right? How dare they require time from their mother? Okay. What norms, rules, ethics, values are being violated for him? Commitment. Yep, fairness. What else? Entitlement, okay, underperformance, whatever, time management, rewarding apathy, so all those things, okay? Now, any professional behavior in this little scenario? Okay, this is what I would say. Remember, it's about you even when it's not about you. So the manager that comes in actually escalates the situation. Where? Do you notice where? That's one. I trusted you. Okay, what's the other one? And it goes back to our 7%, 38%, 55%. Okay, and what else did she do? She what? Okay, and? I can't believe this, and? Okay, there was some she specifically said that actually helped. Yeah, calm down. Okay, how well does that work when someone's angry? Okay, and so she doesn't even realize she's actually adding to the escalation. All right, one more, see if you can figure out this one.
So, why you pick this class anyway? It's pretty hard. Oh, beautiful view. All right.
All right. All right. Y'all shut up now. Now, last week, we talked about the physiology of the animal brain as it pertains to aggression. Now, is there anyone here that can tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive?
I know the answer to this question. Raise your hand.
Anybody? Anyone? Yes or you, sir?
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Your mama said it. Alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes, sir, user.
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
But Mama said
The medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here can tell me where happiness comes from? No. Anyone? All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Mama's right. Mama's right. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
It's okay to fight back. Coach Klein said I could. Mr. Coach Klein said I could. It's fine.
All right, so Waterboy feels robbed, cheated of what? Respect. Okay, his childhood, his childhood. Okay, anything else? Yeah, okay, so he's shamed, he feels shamed, of course, mistreated, those different type of things. Okay, who does he blame? Colonel Sanders, okay, anybody else? Yes, the class, because they're actually laughing at him, okay? And then, of course, later in the story, his mother, right, for filling his head with all these different types of stuff. Now, what norms, rules, values, codes are being violated for him, that he feels are being violated? What's that? Okay. Yes. Okay, what else? Okay. What else? What's being violated? Yeah, do you treat people that way just because they have the wrong answer? So treatment of that's being violated for him, right? Like you said, challenging of his beliefs. What else being violated, right? Culturally, you don't talk about my mama, right? Right, that's a violation, okay? Code of ethic. And then his contribution is being ridiculed. Now, what's the professor's role in this little conflict? Yes, so he's escalating the situation. Now, I show this to you because I just want to give you people, right? I'm sure it doesn't happen here. Escalation usually occurs between 7 to 10 seconds. And you have 7 to 10 seconds to de-escalate a situation. When someone is being what we call amygdala hijacked, okay, so you notice he gets to the point, and then when he gets amygdala hijacked, he turns over and he charges at him, okay? The 7 to 10 seconds, that's the time frame you have to de-escalate that. Amygdala hijacking, this is what happens in the brain. So the amygdala gets charged up, it starts releasing all these neurotransmitters in your mind. And then what happens is the neurotransmitters start flooding the prefrontal cortex, so it lessens the amount of actually memory that you have for rational thinking. Okay? So then you're trying to figure out, why is this person so emotional? Because actually, the way the brain, God created the brain for whatever reason, is now flooded with these neurotransmitters. You ever been in a situation you feel like you just can't calm down? That's what we call amygdala or emotional hijacking. And here's the physiological thing. When those neurotransmitters and things are released into your brain, it takes at least 2 to 4 hours for them to be reabsorbed. And so you're wondering why, okay, I'm breathing like they say, breathe. And as soon as it come back up, whoop, you go right back up to the top. That's because in the brain, the neurotransmitters have to be reabsorbed into the system. And that's why when you're dealing with someone who's emotionally hijacked like that, it's better to come back to it tomorrow. Because then that gives the brain time to just reabsorb those different type of things. Okay, so that's what we mean by, so if you're dealing with someone in the conflict and you can see that, right, and the voices and stuff, whatever, going like that, then it's like, okay, maybe we come back to this tomorrow after we've had a chance for our neurotransmitters and stuff to be reabsorbed, or a couple of hours, whatever that it is, right? So oftentimes when I'm dealing with husbands and wives and stuff, and I'm coaching them, whatever, and working with them, and she's like, well, he walked out on me. And she's mad because he walked out, right? But then when we sit down, he's like, well, the reason I walked out because I know I was getting ready to say something or do something that would have made it worse. Okay? But if you know that and realize that when you see it, you're like, okay, I'm not going to get upset about that. The person needs some breathing time, so give them some breathing time. All right, so now let's find out, what is your conflict management style? What are you bringing to the table? So now, in your handout, it says conflict style assessment, and what I just need for you to do is just to fill out those 15 little statements and give yourself a score for each one. So 1 rarely, 2 sometimes, 3 often, and 4 always. Then when you get to 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, you're just going to add the scores for those numbers there, and then that will give you a total for each of those. So hopefully you have 5 totals. Now, before I let you know what you are, I'm just going to talk about the styles just a little bit so you know what they are, okay? All right, so you can see what you got the highest on. All right, so the first one is the shark. The shark uses what's known as the competing conflict management style, okay? So what that means, they force, they compete, and that's because the shark, once again, is very highly goal-oriented. Now, if you know anything about sharks in the wild, right? When they hear the splashing in the water, what happens? They go after it. Everything on the outside, peripheral, doesn't matter. Whoosh, they're going towards the goal. When they smell the blood, what happens? That's right. They're going towards the blood. So all the other stuff over here just flying by. They're not paying attention to it because they're very highly goal-oriented. So for sharks, you need to realize that whatever the goal is, everything else takes a lower priority. Okay? Everything else takes a lower priority. So for the shark, they may not be thinking that what they're saying is actually hurting your feelings because they're thinking about getting to the goal. Okay? Just like the driver. Okay? Shark style, especially if you're dealing with this, a manager or boss, will not hesitate to use whatever it takes in order to achieve the goal. So if I need to resolve the conflict by yelling at you, then I will yell at you. If I need to resolve the conflict by name dropping, then I'll name drop. Okay? So whatever it takes to resolve the conflict, that's what I'll do. Now, if I'm using this style, I need to realize that people might see me as being threatening. People might see me as being intimidating, and they might see me as being uncooperative. I may not be, but those are the things that might be going through their head. Now, if you're shark, it doesn't mean it's bad, okay? Because there's some great characteristic skills. Sharks are great at arguing and debating. So if you need someone to stand up for your group, for your team, you put a shark out there because they're great at that, okay? Like I said, though, they might use rank or influence, so that's what you have to control. Sharks, you do not have to ask them how they feel or what they think because they will let you know. Okay? Sharks will stand their ground. And then here's the thing. Sharks are great for emergency crisis situations. So when the ship is sinking, we need a shark. Because the sharks, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. You do this, you do that. So the orders go out, whoosh. Now the ship is no longer sinking. Okay? But once the ship is no longer sinking, the shark needs to step out of the way or the people will be jumping off of the boat. Okay? So it's a short term. If you have to use shark, and we do, because sometimes you have to use it with your kids and stuff in discipline, you want to use it during short-term stints. You don't want to use it for long-term situations. Okay? All right, turtles. You can probably figure this one out, right? Turtles just don't like conflict. So they stick themselves back inside the shell. Okay? So their conflict management style is pretty much to avoid the conflict or to ignore the conflict. That works better for them. Okay? Here's the thing though, especially if you're extreme turtle, and I know because I used to be extreme turtle, and I had to learn to change from that. Very passive, right? Taking in everything, letting people walk on me. You know, you walk up at my desk, and I've got all this work up here because I'm saying yes all the time because I don't think that I can say no, right? But then what happens oftentimes, turtles have what's known as the implode explode. And so it gets to the point where they just can't take anymore, you can't fit anymore in the shell, boom, and then it comes out. And then you're like, where did that come from? Right? You see it on the news all the time. Oh, he was such a quiet neighbor. Okay? Taking all the stuff in and no more, bam, and then out it comes. Okay? Now that's the extreme side, but that's how it is. Okay? Characteristics though of turtles are they have the ability to step back because they don't rush into stuff. Okay, so that's good. That's great. The problem with overusing the turtle style is that you leave things unresolved, just like you said. And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to leave them unresolved, because then that resentment and stuff builds up, and then we have the implode, explode. People are walking away, leaving those different type of things because we're leaving it unresolved. And then they have a sense of timing. Okay? Teddy bears. Okay, cute little cuddly teddy bears. Okay, teddy bears use what's known as an accommodating or smooth conflict management style, because what's important to them is not the goal, that doesn't come first, it's the relationship with the people. Okay, that's what they're putting out there in front. But here's the thing about the teddy bear. For them, they will ignore their own stuff, their own goals, as the way to resolve the conflict. So then they just give in. Okay? They just give in. So, teddy bears often set up what we call the win-lose scenario. So by losing, I'm actually winning. Okay? Here's the extreme. Let me give you the extreme case. Domestic violence. Okay? Why is that person still staying there? They're being beat to a pummel. Because the person in their mind is thinking, okay, but if I stay, we're together as a unit, we're together as a family, even though I'm being beat to a pummel. So even though I'm actually losing, I'm winning because I'm keeping it together. Okay, that's extreme. Now, teddy bear also sounds like this. So where would you like to go for dinner today? Well, I don't know, wherever you want to go. So what movie would you like to see? Well, I don't know, whatever movie you want to see. So where do you want to go on vacation? Oh, I don't know, wherever you want to go with vacation is okay with me. And then what happens, the other person starts getting a little bit irritated and annoyed, unless they're a shark, right? Because you're not contributing to making any of the decisions. They want to know what you think. Do you really want to go? Do you enjoy this or not, right? And you're just thinking, okay, well, whatever, just to keep it good, we're great. Okay. So, characteristics about this one. They're good at forgetting their desires, so they're quite selfless. That's great. Okay. They have the ability to yield, and they're great at obeying orders. Okay. Foxes. Foxes are what we call compromisers. Okay, so for foxes, the goal is important and the relationship is important. The thing about foxes is this: I will willing to give up something and sacrifice if you're willing to give up something and sacrifice also. So you want me to give up 2 days of my vacation to come in and do some overtime? My assumption is you're giving up 2 days of your vacation to come in and to work the overtime. Okay? So I'm willing to, just as long as you're willing to also. Okay? Characteristic skills, they're great at negotiating. Okay? They're good at finding value. Okay? And then they're good at making concessions. Okay? And the last one is the owl. Owls are what we call collaborators. Okay? And that's the reason I asked if we have anybody who enjoy conflict, because owls even look at conflict from a whole different perspective. They enjoy it. Okay? Because it's like problem solving. How can we come to a win-win solution scenario? So it becomes like a puzzle or a game for them. So they value both the relationship and the goals. But here's the thing. They try and find solutions that are win-win. And here's the thing about win-win for collaborating owls. The win-win is not about wants. The win-win is about needs. So how can we collaborate on what you need, and how can we collaborate on what I need? We all have wants, but that's not what we're collaborating on. We're making sure that the needs are met. Okay? So then the characteristic skills, they're great at active listening. Okay? They know how to use what we call non-threatening confrontation, even body language. Okay? They're good at identifying concerns and analyzing input. All right, let's see what we've got here. All right, number 16. Hopefully you have a score there on the side. Okay? All right, how many here 16 is their highest score? And it might be tied for your highest score, but your highest score. Okay? These are our all collaborators. So that means that you gravitate towards that style first before any of the other styles. You're trying to find that win-win solution for our needs. Okay? 17, anybody have 17? Okay? 17 is our competing shark. So for our sharks, that goal is really important for the shark. Very highly task-oriented. Okay? 18. 18, high for anyone? Few? Okay. So that's our turtle. Okay. Okay. 19. Just a couple. 19, okay. 19's our teddy bears, our cuddly little teddy bears. And then number 20, highest for number 20. Okay, so those of course are our compromising foxes, okay? So I'm willing to give up something as long as you are willing to give up something. Okay, now once again, this works just like the other ones. If you notice like you've got a lot that are close to the same, that means you have the ability to move within that conflict management style quite easily. Okay? If you have a high high and a small low, it means when I come into someone who's using that conflict management style, it's going to be difficult for me, so I've got to figure out how to adjust my style to work with them. Sure. Yeah, so usually you have top two that you gravitate towards. So let's say, for example, I gave this to a salesman and he was a high shark and high teddy bear, right? And I said, oh, explain that to me. He's like, when I'm at work, it's like dog eat dogs, the goal, whatever. He's like, when I get home to the wife and kids, it's like, whatever, honey. Right, so that's why you had a high shark and a high teddy bear, because those were the two that he gravitated towards in his life. Then I worked with one guy, he was a lawyer, and he had a high shark, right? And when he came to me, he was getting ready to walk out of the door in divorce, okay? And then we sat down and I worked with him. I said, dude, what's going on? And so when I worked with him for a while, I said, when you come home, your wife and kids are not on the witness stand. Because he didn't know how to turn it off. He didn't know how to turn it off. So he was sharking his clients, right, in court, and then he was bringing it home and he was sharking the wife and the kids, and it's too much, right, short term. So it's been great for work, but you can't bring that home and treat them like that all the time, right? Sure. It's both. So it's both nature and nurture. Because then oftentimes you will actually adjust to whatever your environment is, or you'll cave to whatever your environment is. Right? So it's both. So the point is to be aware enough to realize, oh, you know what? Shark is not working in this situation. Maybe I need to move over to collaborative owl and see if we can actually collaborate, because we're not getting the results that we need, right? So it's just to help you to be self-aware, and then when you see shark coming towards you, right? Okay, well, if I realize, okay, shark eats shark, bloodbath, right? So I'm like, let me drop my shark, and let me see if I can move to owl and do some more and bring the situation to a collaboration, right? That's it. So for whatever it is in your life, you can use this for that, right? And that's the basis, just those little three things that we covered, right? You just start implementing those and putting those in practice in your life, in your congregation and stuff, and you will see the results. But here's the thing though, you have to make a concerted effort to do it. You can't just do it a couple of times. It has to become part of who you are. Okay, so compromising, notice this. Let me go back here. Okay, so notice with compromising, I'm willing to sacrifice as long as you are willing to sacrifice. If not, no deal. And then it has to be equal value. Whereas the collaborating, I was trying to figure out, wait a minute, what are your needs? What are my needs? And how can we make sure that the needs are met? That's what we're collaborating on. Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about emotional intelligence. So what we know is you've composed of IQ, EQ, and personality. I can give you a personality test profile and give it to you 10 years later, and it'll be practically close to the same. I can give you an IQ test. You can maybe raise it a couple of points, but it's going to be whatever your IQ. EQ is flexible because it deals with your attitude and all those different pieces of it. So out of all those three components, EQ is the one that you can change the most, right? So that's why Jesus says, have this same mind, because that's the part that you can actually change. Have this attitude, because that's the part of you that has the most flexibility for change, and that's the way that God created it.
I would be willing to venture that if we were to put situations to each one of these questions, not each one, but the category of a situation.
Yeah.
In this situation, these questions answer them. And in this situation, answer the question. Same question.
Yeah.
That we would see these totals doing this.
Possibly, hopefully. That's the thing. So I need to realize if I'm sharking it for every situation because I gravitate towards that, what is going to be the end result? So if I'm a leader, so just think about this, I'm a leader. And that's why I said that I have to be aware. And so I'm not aware that I'm sharking it and I'm not getting the results that I need. Well, why is it? Because I'm using that one type of either leadership style or conflict management style when I need to be flexible. See, and so that's why in Luke chapter 2 and 52, it says Jesus grew, of course, what? In stature, favor. So he grew physically, socially, mentally, and spiritually. So he grew in all four of those areas. So this is exactly the same for us. We can't be one-dimensional because we weren't created for one dimension, right? We were created for so much more. We were created for excellence, right? And so all this is doing, this is helping us to be more self-aware so that I can actually work on the way that I lead, the way that I interact with my brothers and sisters in Christ, that's going to give us the best results so we can be more unified. So when we are having our fallout or whatever, our conflict, now we start looking at it from this perspective. Okay, I know what I'm bringing to the table. What is the other person bringing to the table, right? Am I looking at it from their perspective, or am I just looking at it from my perspective? These are the things that are helping us to be cognizant of, right? In the conflict, what are those three things? Can I identify them? Because then that might help me to address with that person what's going on. And then we have a better chance of actually resolving it. Powerful stuff, okay? But it's also, when we think about it, serious stuff, right? And I love the reactions on your face right now because it shows me that you're really thinking about this. And that's what we want. That's what we want for self-awareness, right? And so someone was asking me, like, Jesus was analytical, right? Because he would ask all those questions to the Pharisees, right? Jesus was expressive. He drove them out of the temple, okay? He's sharking it there, okay? Jesus was amiable. When the women and children, oh, bring the little children, suffer the little children wherever they come to me. So we see all these different aspects that our Savior is implementing, and so that shows me that we all have the ability to move and adapt just like he did, right? And so it just means I might have to work a little bit harder at something that's a little bit more difficult for me. That's all, but it can be done. And he showed us that it can be done. And then he says, you know what? I'll help you. And here's the thing. When he says that he'll help us, and then we say, you know what? We'll help each other, then we can do this, people. We can do this. We can change the world. I'll close and I'll leave you with this thought. So you guys have probably heard of Constantine, right? So what changed Constantine's mind that he was willing to either embrace Christianity or give Christianity a break? So for 300 years before Constantine's time, there was these rumors going around that there was these group of people in Rome that were going around eating people and drinking their blood. Okay, guess who those people were? Christians. Because guess what they were doing on Sunday? Yes, they were eating flesh and they were drinking blood. So they were seen as a pariah inside society. No one really checked out to see what they were doing, but that's the rumors and stuff, and Nero helped all that go around. But something happened during Constantine's time. There was a series of 8 plagues that actually hit Rome within an 8-year period. 8 plagues. Roman people were dying. For some reason, these group of people who were eating people's flesh and drinking their blood were the only people who were going around to the Roman people, risking their lives, trying to help them to get better. And they were dying themselves because they were contracting the plagues by helping the Roman people. Guess who they were? They were the Christians. And that changed Constantine's mind about this whole concept of Christianity and who these people were by what they did. They didn't have to become whatever political party or whatever. They just allowed Christ to be seen in them to the point where they were ready to live it out to the point of contracting whatever disease and death. And they let that be their witness stone of who they were. That's leadership. That's team building. And that's what we have been called to do. Thank you guys so much for your time. Yes, thanks for coming, man.